Hello, this is Relic Librarian Kirk Johnson. This Relic video is being posted on the 1st of April, and in honor of April 1st, we're presenting this short video on how not to get fooled by common genealogical mistakes. This is just a quick overview of some common fallacies and errors people often make when researching family history that makes an already difficult job even harder. Each of us has our own reasons for wanting to research our family history. Perhaps you've heard some family stories about a distant ancestor. Perhaps, like actor Tom Hanks, you've heard stories that you were related to someone famous in the past. But whatever your reasons, you need to follow the same strategy. Namely, you need to start at the end. The end of your family tree, that is, yourself. You can't start at the beginning, whether that beginning is a famous ancestor, an infamous ancestor, or a great-grandparent who you suspect may have been adopted. You can't go back and work your way forward. The best way to research your family history is to start in the here and now with yourself and with the people you're immediately related to and work your way back from there. The temptation to dive headfirst into the distant past, chasing after a distant ancestor who was famous or possibly infamous, is hard to resist. But you need to remember that the way to establish that person is your ancestor is not to look at them and then look for the connection to you, but to start with yourself and work your way back to him or her. And the best way to do that, again, is don't forget to start with your immediate ancestors and your living ancestors, your parents, your grandparents, and so forth, the people you're most immediately directly descended from. Find out everything you can about them, birth dates, marriage, and other events. Get that information while you can. Similarly, most people have access to a large number of old family photos. In many cases, these photos are either in a photo album or stored in a box somewhere. More often than not, these photos do not have captions. Why would they? The people who took them and kept them knew who those people were and what those places were. But someday they won't be around to tell you that. While they're still around, make sure you get that information. Caption your pictures. Index them. Make sure that you have identifying information for all of them before it's too late. Once you realize that researching your family history is a long, involved process that's going to involve a lot of meticulous research, you need to set yourself up so that you start on the right foot. There's a lot of mistakes people make when they first start doing their family history research that ultimately end up costing them time and effort that could have been saved if they'd started off on the right foot. Some of these problems include jumping into the research without preparation, not knowing what you're about to embark on. You can learn how to do genealogy research efficiently and effectively by taking classes or seminars, either in person or online. There's also many books and other sources where you can get some basic guidelines on how to do genealogy research. It's good to have some of this ready, and it's good to have a reference guide of some source handy that you can always refer to as you working your way through. Another mistake is not organizing records. When you first start researching your family history, it's easy to think this isn't a problem. The amount of records is small, manageable, and you've looked at them recently. You know what you have and what they apply to. But as time goes by and the volume of records increases, mistakes in filing systems can really come back to haunt you. So establish a good filing system early and categorize your records in a systemic manner. Also, be sure to avoid not keeping copies of information. It's one thing to know something, it's another thing to know that you know it and be able to show that you know it. So be sure to cite sources whenever possible and to cite them completely and accurately. If you're just doing your family research for your own edification, that's fine, but others may want to know how you got the information and to be able to verify it. If you're working with, say, the Daughters of the American Revolution, you're going to have to be able to show the provenance of all the information you have. So don't double your work by having to go back and find out how you know what you know, so to speak. Another mistake is uncritically accepting published sources, whether in print or online. For example, other people's family trees and ancestry or family search. These sources can be helpful, but at the same time, if a mistake is published and you don't double check it, that mistake can lead you astray or send you after the wrong person thinking that that is actually your ancestor. Whenever you find a ready-made family tree, look at it critically. Not suspiciously, but do analyze the sources and make sure that the person who published that verified all the information before they put it up. Another mistake is overlooking what is often called negative research. In other words, things you don't know. Sometimes you had troubles finding a death date or a marriage date or the date that a family moved from one residence to another. If you don't have that information, you can't find it, and you're ready to move on, that's fine, but make a note of it. Make a note of what you don't know. Don't let those holes become stumbling blocks for future research. Another mistake, and this is common and absolutely part of human nature, is looking for what you want to find instead of what you did find. It's easy to, if you're looking for, say, a Maggie Johnson in Alma, Nebraska, and then you come across a Martha Johnson in nearby Almena, Kansas, just across the border, to think, hey, maybe this is the right person. Or maybe you find two people with a very similar name in the same state, or the same county even. If you've been looking for that person a long time, it's very easy to convince yourself that you've found the right person and to overlook signs that, in fact, this is a person with the same name, a similar birth date, in a similar location, but they're two different people. Another mistake is to not critically examine sources. Now, this can go both ways. You can take a source that's incomplete or faulty and take it as the truth without looking deeper to make sure that the information is correct. But you can also sometimes overlook correct information simply because the person writing it down, say a census taker or a person issuing a marriage license, misspelled something or got a family relationship wrong. Perhaps wrote down a mother as a mother-in-law because they were speaking to the spouse, not the head of the household, who would have been the father and the husband on census records in the past. Sometimes these misspellings and entry errors can convince you haven't found the right person when in fact you have. Another mistake is not doing collateral research. Collateral research is research that's outside your immediate family history, but can give you the context you may need to understand what you found or what you need to be looking for. If you had an ancestor, for example, who came from another country, you'll need to know something about how they got here. So understanding how to research, find, and examine the rosters of people who came over on ships is very important. And finally, this is a common fallacy these days, assuming everything is online now. You can find a lot online, and more information is being digitized and put online all the time, but not everything. Don't think that because you haven't found something in Family Search or Ancestry.com or some other online source that it doesn't exist. The deeper you dig, the more likely you're going to find yourself having to come to a place like Relic or possibly to a courthouse or some other archive or repository of records. Along with all those general fallacies to avoid, there are other issues that can come up depending on which era and which region you're researching. For example, if you were researching family history in colonial and early national America, you may encounter some problems if you're unfamiliar with naming conventions of the time. For example, early Americans tended to reuse a small number of first names over and over and over again. And that can cause a lot of confusion because sometimes you're not exactly sure which Elizabeth Jenkins or John Smith you're talking about. Also, because there were so many first names and surnames shared in a given area, often you'll find in the records men referred to as senior and junior. Naturally, you may assume this refers to father and son, but at the time that wasn't true. Senior and junior were used at the time to distinguish between two men who were unrelated living in the same area. the senior was the older man and the junior was the younger man. You'll want to avoid assuming that senior and junior imply a direct family relationship. Other issues during the colonial era can come up if you don't understand the difference between the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar. The British did not change from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar until 1752. This was a phased-in change. That means that for an overlapping period, you might have dates in one calendar or the other. The Julian calendar started the year on March 25th, not January 1st. And so for records at this time, you need to know which calendar you're using. Sometimes the dates are even given in a hyphenated or form with a slash, giving both possible years. And finally, earlier records were handwritten, and handwriting norms were different 200 years ago, back in the colonial era or even the early national era. You'll want to familiarize yourself as best as possible with styles of handwriting and norms. Letters were sometimes written in a different style than they would be now. It's very easy to just give up and assume that something's scrawled so incomprehensibly you can't make heads or tail of it. But if you spend some time doing a little research and look at some handwriting guides, you may be able to decipher a much larger number of older records than initially you were able to. So again, these are just some basic fallacies to avoid for people who are new to family research or genealogists just getting started. I hope this has been helpful, and we hope to see you at Relic in the very near future.